So in today's tutorial, we're going to be looking at making this wonderful mint chocolate soap. But as you can see here, I've got some chocolate buttons. These are white chocolate buttons, standard stuff that you would normally get from any shop. And I'm popping a little bit of my batch oils in, and I'm going to melt this down and incorporate the chocolate into the oils. Now, why am I doing this? Well, if you think about what chocolate is made up of, it's made up of basically milk powder or milk solids, sugar, and cocoa butter. So all of those three things we would normally add into a soap in various ways and means. So rather than kind of just going to three different ingredient sources, I'm getting them all in one here. So there is basically going to add some sugar, which is going to boost the lather. We've got some milk going in there, which is going to add a luxury feeling to the soap. And we've also got that cocoa butter just adding to the super fat. So why not add these chocolate things into your soaps? You can absolutely. And it's a really nice label appeal as well. So not only is it doing some good stuff in the soap, it's also going to add some great label appeal. And you can feel really good about using this. And it's a kind of luxury bar. So the other thing that I'm going to add into this soap, which I've got here, is some coconut milk powder. Now, I like using milk powders and things like that because I can add them into my oils and I can still make my lye solution using distilled water. I'm getting all the benefits from it, but I'm getting none of that scorching and none of that colour variation that you can get by using some milks and stuff and using them in the lye, which will then scorch. Also adding in some kaolin clay into here as well. Kaolin clay is a wonderful ingredient because it is used in things like face masks and it has a really soothing approach. And because it's a clay, as it goes through saponification, me personally, I believe that it's going to be suspended into the soap rather than being kind of changed within the soap. And therefore, you are still going to get some of those benefits from the kaolin clay, again, because it's in suspension and it's not being diluted and changed by the saponification process. Alongside the white chocolate I'm adding into the entire batch, I'm also going to be using cocoa powder to use as my colorant. So we're getting a lot of really good things into this bar, and it's going to give us a load of really good things out the other side. So I'm using a good kind of 2 heaping tablespoons of cocoa powder there, and that's because I really want to get some chocolatiness into this bar. But because this is a powder, what I need to do is something called bloom the chocolate, or essentially add in an oil to this to allow it to absorb that oil initially. So when it goes into my main batch, it's not going to affect the acceleration too much. Now, I've got some olive oil pomace, which is a blended oil that I use for this. So this is going to kind of add to the super fat, but because I've got kaolin and I've got coconut powder going in there as well, I'm just going to add this little bit of extra oil as a super fat so that overall I'm going to have enough super fat left in the bar after all these powders have gone in. And that's something that can affect the trace when you're using things like this. You just have to be a little bit careful and make sure that you really do take into account that a lot of these powders will absorb oil. And you'll notice that because often when you do things like this, you'll find that if you bloom them, they'll get thicker over time, which means they've been absorbing the oil. So I've just done some maths and worked out exactly what percentage of this I need to pour off and what I need to kind of keep. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our lye water solution in. Now this is going to be the entire batch, and what I like to do is get the lye water solution in, give it a good stir, and then go in with the stick blender. By stirring it, you're not starting that emulsion process too quickly, and you've got a little bit more work time with it, because what I want to be able to do is get the first layer to set up really nicely. So over blend that and then have the second layer a little bit looser so that it'll pour in but still be relatively thick overall. So to my left there, you can see I've got some green colouring. So this is going to be a green and brown soap, really echoing that kind of mint chocolate theme. I do like to try and make my colours match the kind of scents that are going on, because I think it actually pulls more into the senses of the person that will be using it to understand that. So I'm just going to bring this batter here up to a very light emulsion, just a very, very thin trace. And then I'm going to start pouring some little bits and pieces off and getting the right kind of measure of what I need for the base colour and what I need for the top colour. Now the base colour is going to be the brown, and that's going to be the most. And the green is going to be the kind of top section as well. So I'm going to add my fragrance oil in here. This is just a peppermint essential oil. You do need to be careful with peppermint essential oil. It is one of those that can cause some reactions in some people, and I would recommend that you do look up the recommended usage rates for essential oils within the country that you're in to make sure that you are within the tolerances for that essential oil. So once we've brought this up to trace, we're going to portion this off now in a second. So let me just scrape the rest of this off of my bell here of my stick blender. Just make sure we're not wasting too much, because this has got a lot of additives in it, a lot of good stuff in there, and we don't want to be wasting too much of it. So that's my batter there. And as you can see, it's a nice kind of creamy color. And this does lighten a little bit, but it's still going to retain that color. So what I'm going to do is into my bucket here with my cocoa powder, I'm going to pour off the majority of what I need for that. And I do always make sure that I put my colorants into some sort of carrier oil beforehand, because I find it easier to then get it to stir through and to be a consistent color by stirring, so I don't have to stick blend it in and I'm not getting further and further away from that acceleration point of the batter. So I think it's about 480 something grams in there. So I've got that in. I can get that stirred through here now. And as you can see, because I've used that and I've bloomed it and I've put it into a little bit of oil first, you can see how quickly that has stirred in without me having to stick blend the bejesus out of it. So do make sure that you do kind of get your colorants into oils beforehand. It just makes your life a lot easier. It means that you're not accelerating your trace too quickly. So in this last little bit of batter in this one here, I'm just making sure that it's working. Now I sacrificed some batter initially to get all of the colour out of the main pot there, rather than me pouring it in and leaving stuff in there. Just because I've had some troubles in the past with trying to get colour in oil out of these little pots. It just becomes a huge mess and I hate it. So by using the batter to get the colourant out, anything that's left in the pot will saponify and it will wash away far easier than that colourant in oil. And you can see that I'm getting that really beautiful kind of deep green mint colour. It's almost a jungle green, in fact. But I do know it's going to change slightly with saponification, so I'm not at all disappointed in the colour of that one at all, because it is going to tweak slightly. So what we're going to do is we're going to pour the main colour in. We're going to allow that to set up and then put the secondary colour on the top of it, and then maybe go in with a little bit of that brown colour just on top as a kind of topper for the main bar. So we're just going to stir this now, and this is going to come up to the trace I want it to by stirring, rather than me kind of trying to stick blend it to trace and it getting really kind of sticky. Now, the more batter you have, the quicker it's likely to come to trace than less batter. So because the green one is the secondary one I'm using, that's probably going to come to trace quicker, and therefore this should all work out quite nicely. So when we talk about trace, what exactly are we talking about? So if you're new to soaping and you've heard the term trace, what do we mean by that? So what trace is specifically talking about is, in a little bit like baking, when you do this kind of motion over the top of the soap, you can leave a ribbon on top of the soap. Now, if you look there, there is no ribbon really being left, or it's a very minute ribbon. So we would classify this as being a thin trace. That little bit of soap that's kind of left on top of the surface of the soap is very thin and it disappears very quickly. So that trace is a thin trace. When you get to medium trace, that trace is going to sit on the top a little bit longer before sinking in, and kind of the thick trace is going to keep its shape. So those are the kind of three stages of trace you're looking for, where that little ribbon on the top sinks in, then you have the ribbon that kind of stays on the top for a little while before it sinks in, and then you have that ribbon of soap that stays on the top, or it's a very, very kind of pipeable consistency. And that's what we're looking for when we talk about trace. Now, because I know that this particular soap is going to be two colours and I'm fairly confident in what we're doing, the green is setting up a bit thicker than the brown. So what I'm going to now do is just bring this brown up to a little bit of a thicker trace by stick blending it. Now, agitation will always make your trace go quicker. And because I'm quite confident that I know what I want to do with this soap and I don't have big swirls and it's going to be 2 layers and there's going to be some texture in there, I'm quite confident that I can go ahead and do this because my pour is not going to require that length of trace. So you can see here, just by stick blending that for what, 10, 15 seconds max, we've got a thicker trace going on. And you'll notice in this one that we've got a much more sticking to the stick blender. It's not running off quite so quickly. And when we put this into the batter, and you'll see in a second how that batter's kind of now shifting slightly differently, this is getting into a kind of medium thick trace. And I'm quite happy with that because I do want some texture going on with this particular bar of soap. So you should be able to see now that we're getting some more kind of lines happening in there. And if I do the same trick again, you'll see now we're at a medium trace. That ribbon is staying on the top, but it's slowly sinking in. And we're just about the right point now for me to get this first layer in, really. and you'll look at this second layer and you see just how thin that trace is remaining. The actual pattern you can see on top there is from the mica. The mica powder itself has a little kind of light contrast, so you can see where the mica lays, but it's still sinking in quite quickly. So let's get this into the mold and start building this soap up with this kind of slightly thicker trace we've got going on here. So let's go on to the pour here. We're going to put the brown in first, and now this is thick enough for me to be able to kind of put a bit of texture into it without it being very, very thick. There's also enough softness there that it's going to adhere to the second layer, and that's the other thing, is you need enough moisture between two layers to get them to actually combine and sit together and join when you do layers, because sometimes if you don't get that, they'll fall apart. And I'm just going to come in with a very, very light texturing here. It's very soft, so it's not going to do great peaks, but what I just want is some peaks and troughs in there to create some interest through the bar so that it's not just a flat line going on. I want this to have a little bit more of an organic feel to it. And now we can get this green layer poured into the top. Now what you'll notice is I'm confident this is not going to break through, but I'm not worried about it kind of shifting and moving around the brown a little bit. But as you can see there, we're basically just pouring this very slowly and very gently onto the top of this fairly well set up soap. Now some of the weight is going to shift stuff, but I'm very confident it's not going to break through. If you feel that your bottom layer is not quite as set up as this and you want to be a little bit more careful, you can just use your spatula to kind of allow the soap to fall onto the spatula into the mold, and that will then allow the soap to flow out and not break through the surface underneath it. So we're zooming a little bit now, and we're just going to put the last two bits on. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to top this with some more brown, and then I'm going to put some green just in the very top of that. Because the brown's a little bit thicker, I'm going to spoon it on with the spatula, just making sure that goes all the way across. So we get this really nice cross section. And then what we are going to do is we're just going to texture the top of this one very simply. So it's a really simple bar of soap, but it's got some interest. It's got some really nice additives in there. And overall, this is just a really wonderful bar of soap. The added benefit of having the cocoa powder in there is that you're going to get a slight exfoliation from this bar as well. So it's great for kind of after summer, in the evenings, maybe when you've been out in the sun a little bit. Now, you should not get a tingle from a essential oil bar using peppermint oil. If you're getting a tingle, you've used too much, or the person that's made the bar may have put some menthol crystals dissolved into it, which will give you the tingle. Okay, so if you are getting a tingle from this soap, you need to be a little bit careful. You may be sensitive to this essential oil, and you may need to just watch it. But I'm absolutely fine with it, and I just love the smell and everything of this bar, so we're fine with it. But just be aware of that if you do use a peppermint essential oil in your soaps, that people can be sensitive to it and they may feel a tingle even if you don't. So now that that's all done, I'm just going to kind of texture this top bit by pulling it up into the center very simply, very easily, just kind of gently pulling it up, not going too mad, but just enough to pull that up into the middle of the soap, creating a little mound, as you'll see in the final soap images that you've seen. Let's get rid of some of this mess that I've made, and then we're just going to pull these all up. And again, if you're using any metal tools within your soaps at this stage, please use stainless steel, nothing aluminium, nothing that is reactive to the lye that is still present in this soap before it has fully saponified. So just be a little bit aware of that and a little bit careful when doing it. And I think we've got a little bit of green left, which we're just going to pop along the top, and then this soap will be ready to go in for CPOP, which stands for cold process oven process, and it just means I'm going to heat the oven up to its lowest temperature. I'm then going to pop the soap into it and allow it to come to saponification in that warmth, which then should force the soap through gel and intensify the colours in this. But it's already quite an intense coloured soap, so we're just going to make sure we really solidify those colours by CPOPing it. Here we are 24 hours later, and I'm just going to pop this soap out of the mould. And there you go. So you can see how really beautiful that brown colour is from the cocoa butter, and that green has lightened slightly. So what looked quite deep and dark in the original video has now lightened to something that's that really nice minty green. So greens are really difficult when it comes to soap making. Anyway, let's get this soap cut and see what we've got going on the inside. So all I'm going to do is take a little sliver off of the end. I always like to do this because the ends never end up kind of the way you really want them. And I want some soap to play with because I really enjoy this soap. going to take that a little bit off there, and then let's get a really nice cut of this soap straight the way through and see what we've got on the inside. Give that a quick wipe, and then we'll slice down and we'll have a look at what we've got in this soap. And the inside of this soap looks like that. Now you can see around the edge here, we've got this really interesting brown edge. This soap is going to continue to darken over time, and it's become a lot darker in that brown section. So you do need to just let this sit for a good 4 to 6 weeks and let all of that kind of colour really intensify in the brown, and it will become that really dark chocolate ebony colour rather than it being that kind of light. Any holes like that we can use, and we can fill those with a little bit of the scraps from the ends, which is why I take the ends off. And let's just give another cut here and see exactly what we've got going through this soap. And then we'll get them stamped, and you can see the final bars in a moment. So if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps me grow and allows me to make more videos and tutorials for all of you. When you subscribe, don't forget to click the bell icon if you'd like to get notified when a new video is uploaded. And thanks a lot, Soapsters. I'll see you again next time.